Hello guys, and welcome to week 2 of Word 110. This is the kind of video lecture to go along with the PowerPoint for this week on collecting research and building stories. And this is your introduction to finding your topics for your research projects throughout the semester. Before I get started, I will say I've got my kittens sleeping on my lap, so you might hear him snore throughout this. If there's a weird noise, it's probably one of the two cats. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about problems, stakes, and stories, and discussing how research connects to storytelling. So looking ahead, we're going to be dealing with finding a topic that interests you, asking questions, exploring problems, and then we're going to be connecting this to your first project of the semester, which is your rhetorical analysis essay, where this is your chance to explore an argument related to your topic, and this is not necessarily the angle you're going to take in your final photo essay, but it is a chance for you to ask questions and explore some other people's angles of how to approach your topic. And then finally, at the very end of the semester, of course, will be your final photo essay, where you'll have an in-depth exploration of your angle for the topic and maybe how you have a personal stake in whatever problem or issue you choose. So, starting out this process, first, you need to choose what topic you're going to be researching. So for this semester, you're going to be choosing first a social, environmental, ethical, cultural, what have you problem. So this can be a small or large problem. Think global climate change, huge problem, affects the entire world. Feral cats, a smaller problem maybe, but it affects a lot of different communities. And then, second, really important, you're choosing a specific community that this problem affects. So for global climate change, I put an example on the syllabus that you might want to check out, that you can look at how it maybe specifically affects indigenous communities, how it specifically affects, Americans versus Europeans. That might be a little broad of a topic, but you get the idea. For feral cats, you might look at what's the feral cat problem like in Lexington. And that'll give you opportunities to maybe even connect with the local community a little bit. So the next step would be asking questions. Research always starts with questions. You can never ask too many questions. So sticking with the feral cat example, you might start out asking questions like, how has COVID-19 affected the ability for the Humane Society to spay and neuter strays? That's a really good question to ask of any of your topics of how has COVID-19 affected blank, because it's pretty much affected everything. Who could I interview? This is a really important question to ask yourself as you're thinking about this topic, because you will have to have some sort of primary source in your final photo essay, and having local community members to reach out to this early on in the process could be really helpful. So for this example, you might interview a volunteer with Spays the Way through the Humane Society, maybe just a Humane Society volunteer, that sort of thing. And then, have I seen a feral cat around? Thinking about your stake in the problem. Do I have a feral cat that I adopted? I have a feral cat sitting on my lap right now who I adopted. Can I take some photographs of whatever problem that I am addressing? Maybe you go to the Humane Society and take photos. Maybe you've got a feral cat colony living by the dorms, and so you want to take some photos of that. Just starting to collect evidence and do that sort of everyday research that's really important in this process. So I have here a brainstorming guide for starting to think about what your topic might be. So I ask you to think about what communities you're a member of. This might be thinking about what's my major, what's my career field going to be, and what kind of problems affect people in that career field. It might be what's my sexuality, ethnicity, or race, and how are problems being addressed in those communities right now. Um, so you can complete those in your notebook, and they'll connect to the discussion board post for this week that will ask you to think of 1 to 2 actual viable research topics. So this is really important to do this brainstorming work now. Um, Sorry, my computer froze for a second, but we are back. Um, so you guys read for this week Catherine Savini's Looking for Trouble. That really gets you a good idea of how to approach research in a meaningful way. So she talks about 4 steps to finding problems and developing meaningful projects. The first one is noticing. You guys should be looking around at the world and noticing problems, noticing what's going on around you in your communities, in other communities. It's really important to be aware of everything, and which is a lot to ask in our current climate, especially always being connected through social media and Twitter. I know it's a lot, but it is really important to notice things, notice people, individuals, and to think about what kinds of issues affect them in different ways. The second thing is to articulate a problem and its details. It's important to be able to voice the issue that you're going to talk about, or maybe the issues with your topic. You'll see in your discussion board post that I ask you to think about what kinds of conversations are happening around your research topic, and to think about what's being left out of those conversations. Who are the people who are usually discussing them? I had a friend write a really great thesis on plantations in the South, and how most of the time the people actually curating tours for those plantations are white. So that's a problem that relates to that topic and makes it a more complex issue. The third is posing fruitful questions. So I already said research starts with questions. Once you ask questions, you can start to find sources that address those questions, and you can start to find meaningful angles that are different from what has already been talked about in your topic or field or community. And the fourth is identifying what's at stake. So thinking about this topic, how does it affect you and the communities you're a member of, or why are you interested in it? It might be as simple as that. So I'll have you watch this TED Talk by Chimamanda Adichie, and she's a really amazing author who talks about the danger of a single story and how our communities lift up often majority voices instead of thinking about let's lift up individual voices so that we can show individual stories and how those stories can impact different people in diverse communities. So that's a really great video to watch, to be thinking about why should I choose a topic that I have a stake in. Why should I choose something that's not just the topic that everyone chooses, like when you were in undergrad and everyone wrote about legalizing marijuana, that sort of thing. So here are some questions to reflect on in your notebook after you watch that video. I really encourage you to think about these questions and do some thoughtful reflection. It'll help you a lot in the long run with trying to narrow down this research topic. So the last thing I'll talk about is integrative thinking versus skeptosis. This is something that Savini touches on, and I wanted to talk about it because it's really important to your success in this class. So Savini says integrative thinkers embrace complexity. They sit with problems, eschewing the easy answers. They tap into the tension between two opposing ideas to produce a third idea, and ultimately they produce new insights and develop new alternatives. This habit of mind can and should be cultivated. So in this class, I'm really trying to get you to think outside the box, as cliche as that might sound. I'm asking you to think about questions that don't have clear answers, problems that don't have clear solutions, or maybe communities that are affected by problems in really complex ways that might seem simplistic from the outside, but once you start asking questions and doing research, you discover it's not so simple after all. And it's really important to be an integrative thinker who allows those complexities to sit with you rather than trying to seek out that easy solution. Sorry, my computer is sometimes really slow. All right, skeptosis, she defines as rationalized acts of selective blindness that occur by allowing certain information to be discounted or unexamined. It is thinking and acting within the frame offered. To suffer skeptosis is to accept the rhetorical presence of a given narrative frame and act in the directions that frame suggests. So basically, skeptosis is the opposite of integrative thinking. If integrative thinking is being open to complexity, skeptosis is being closed to it. If you have skeptosis, you're thinking within the box. And you're thinking, this is the way it's always been done. So this is the way it's going to happen now. Or this is the way I was taught to think by my parents. So this is the way that I'm going to think, without letting any sort of complexity or differing opinion inside that little bubble. So it's really important to be recognizing that in ourselves. Even I still suffer from it sometimes, and I've been in school way too many years. So this is just a further further definition of this difference. Thinking about holding two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time and still be able to function. Being able to think about paradoxes, think about complex ideas in a way that's not limited, versus I'm going to look at this one thing and not consider the complexities that are living all over here, which is skeptosis. So she gives a lot of examples of skeptosis. This is one that I pulled out I feel like it's a really, really good example, a really potent example of what skeptosis looks like. And be thinking about how that affects you in your life, and maybe even reflect on that in your notebook too. So basically, articulating complex problems and posing fruitful questions is not only part of the process of writing and research, but it's also part of the product. So what you're doing now in your discussion board posts is going to end up in your final essay. So make sure you do a good job of researching, asking questions, and living with those complexities. You need to be telling a story that's important to you for the projects for this semester. You're going to be uniquely positioned to tell certain stories, to tell your story, and embrace that. Think about what Adichie says about the single story and how you should be telling your personal individual story. And think about how this specific community is related to you if you're a member of it, and think about what primary and secondary research you could be doing in order to accurately and completely tell that story. All right, so after you watch this, you should move on to the discussion board post, and I look forward to hearing about all of the topics you guys come up with for your projects for the semester.